Kentucky in Nashville, UCLA in Seattle, Oregon in Portland. There are plenty of choices for Gonzaga's toughest matchup of this upcoming season.
You are Locked On Zags, your daily podcast on the Gonzaga Bulldogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, y'all? Happy Friday and welcome into the Locked On Zags podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am your host and longtime Gonzaga podcaster, Andy Patton, here to bring you news and updates on all things Zag athletics. Folks, just like there's more to every player, more dedication, more attention to detail, there's more to a Mazda vehicle. Stay tuned for later in the episode. We'll have highlights in this week's Moving the Game Forward segment, Mazda, Move and Be Moved. Well, happy Friday, folks. Fun show for you today here in the off season. We're talking about Gonzaga's toughest matchups on paper for this upcoming season. It was difficult to narrow this list down to 5. Lots of very, very good games the Zags will be playing this year. Then in the second and third segments, we are going to continue our series where we are ranking the best Mark Few era Zags from the various states in this country. We've talked about a handful of different states up to this point. Today, we're talking the Lone Star State, Texas. We know Drew Timme is at the top of that list. There's not going to be any secrets there, but we got 9 other players after Drew to talk about some really fun names that we're going to remember to close out the week. But like I said, we are starting the show talking about Gonzaga's schedule this year. We've talked about it after it came out a few weeks ago. Finally, Gonzaga was not the absolute last team at the Division I level to release their non-conference schedule, but as usual, they were one of the later teams to do so. But we knew about many of these games throughout the offseason. We knew about Kentucky. We knew about UCLA. We knew some of these matchups were going to happen. And once that schedule finally came together, we're looking at a group of teams, 7 of Gonzaga's known matchups in the non-conference slate are against teams that are considered top 40 teams at Bart Torvik, that are considered top 45 teams by John Rothstein's preseason rankings, that are considered top 50 teams at Evan Miyakawa's updated team rankings for this year. So Gonzaga's got themselves a very, very tough non-conference schedule. That doesn't include a true road game against a Big 12 team in Arizona State. And then, of course, getting into conference play, this team is going to play a very good, even though they lost 4 starters, team in St. Mary's. They're going to play a very good San Francisco team that returned great players like Tyrone Riley and Robbie Beasley and added some talent via the transfer portal as well. All in all, the final year in the WCC is going to be tough game after tough game after tough game for Mark Few and the Zags. But we narrowed it down and picked the 5 toughest games and picked a few things we're going to be looking forward to in those matchups. We start with number 1. I think this is pretty obvious. It's Gonzaga taking on Kentucky in Nashville. This game will be December 5th. Again, the fact that it's a very, very good team, a team most places have in the top 10 heading into the season. The fact that it's a road environment, obviously not a true road game, but Nashville is very far from Spokane. Gonzaga will be traveling across multiple time zones, halfway across the country to play a team much closer to their house. And Kentucky's going to be great. I mean, there's just very little doubt that this team's going to be a problem once again under coach Mark Pope. The projected starting 5, according to John Rothstein: Jaden Quaintance at the 5, the transfer from Arizona State; Mo Diabate at the 4, Otega Owe, Denzel Aberdeen, and Jalen Lowe are the 3 guards. That would have Tulane transfer Cam Williams coming off the bench, as well as returners Brandon Garrison and Colin Chandler, as well as some great freshmen Jasper Johnson, Malachi Moreno, and Brandon Hawthorne. A big hinge for this game, however, is the health of Jaden Quaintance. Quaintance was a freshman last year at Arizona State. He's a 6'10" big, one of the best rim protectors in all of college basketball last year. Folks, he played most of last season as a 17-year-old. He's going to be 18 most of this year as a sophomore for Kentucky. That's why he didn't go one and done last year, is because he was not eligible to be in the NBA draft. He is one of the youngest players in his class in college basketball, an elite rim protector, a massive problem for Graham Ike and Braden Huff, but he is injured. He's had surgery on his ACL after the season, and it is very, very unclear when he will return. The majority of, we have saw Mark Pope talked about this very recently, like a few days ago, and they're optimistic. They said he's working, he's doing great. He's kind of making a recovery faster than they thought that he would, but they're going to be very cautious with him. A lot of the expectations, projections have him returning somewhere around late November or early December at the earliest. Gonzaga, of course, plays Kentucky December 5th. I would say there's probably a less than 50% chance that Quaintance plays in that game. That is a huge difference maker in terms of this matchup for Gonzaga, because Gonzaga's strength is, of course, in the front court. And Kentucky not having their rim protector, not having their super bouncy, athletic center is a big, big swing in terms of the ability for Gonzaga to win this basketball game. There are still plenty of other questions for the Zags. How do they guard Otega Oweh? 6'5" monstrous guard who's great at getting downhill. Can the Zags guard the perimeter effectively against what will probably be one of the 3 or 4 best three-point shooting teams in all of college basketball? Lots of questions for this game. Should be a really fun one, but a very tough matchup for Gonzaga. Number 2 is UCLA in Seattle. Projected starting 5 for Mick Cronin and the Bruins. Xavier Booker at the 5, Tyler Bilodeau, Eric Daly, and Sky Clark, 3 returners starting as well. And then, of course, New Mexico transfer and All-American candidate Donovan Dent at the 5. Trent Perry, and then San Diego center Steven Jamerson, 2 key reserves off the bench. Main questions for this game: will Gonzaga's Climate Pledge Arena curse continue? They struggle at Climate Pledge. They have not won a game since it has been renamed. They've played, albeit great teams there like Alabama and UConn and many other phenomenal programs. But this is a game that you really want to win. This is a game you really want to pick up. Obviously, you lost to UCLA last year at the Intuit Dome. They returned 3 key starters. They also add a great, great player in Donovan Dent. This is going to be a fun game. It's going to be a tough game. It's going to be a fun game. I think the big question is, I don't really trust this front court for UCLA. Xavier Booker, transfer after 2 years at Michigan State. He's just wasn't very good for Michigan State. And I was a little surprised at how invested UCLA was in bringing him in. I don't think he's a great rim protector. I don't think he's a great low post player. I think that's a potential big time advantage for Gonzaga in the front court, because their backup center is Steven Jamerson, who started at San Diego last year. Gonzaga didn't have any problems scoring on San Diego last year. So that'll be the big kind of question for that game, as well as who on earth is going to guard Donovan Dent. I think you see a lot of Jalen Worley and Emmanuel Innocente in that game. Number 3 for Gonzaga is Oregon in Portland. Had there's a couple of games that could have been in the mix here. I think Alabama might be ranked higher than Oregon, maybe be a better team this year. But while Portland in the Moda Center is certainly not going to feel like a road environment, there's going to be plenty of Gonzaga fans there. There's also going to be a whole heck of a lot of Oregon fans in the house for that one. And this game's got some extra juice to it. These two teams not voluntarily played each other since 1984. There's going to be some emotion. There's going to be some feeling in this one. Oregon returns 3 starters: Nate Biddle, KJ Evans, and Jackson Shellstad. Brings in a pair of transfers in Devin Pryor and TK Simpkins as well. Nate Biddle's the problem for Gonzaga. 7-footer, great shot blocker, over 2 blocks per game last year in the Big Ten. Good 3-point shooter. He's going to be an issue for Graham Ike and Braden Huff on both sides of the basketball. That's the big question, as well as Jackson Shellstad, a gifted scorer, a gifted distributor. He can get downhill. He can get to the rim. He can break you down with his passing. Those 2 players are going to be a problem for Gonzaga, but I think that this game's a little bit more manageable. I think there's going to be a lot of Zag fans in the house. I also think this game being in late December gives both these teams a chance to really gel, which I think will be an advantage for Gonzaga in this one. Number 4, Alabama in the Players Era Festival. Really glad Gonzaga's getting Alabama first, because having to play Alabama when you played a game 24 hours previously is a nightmare situation, because Alabama runs and runs and runs and runs. They love to get out in transition. They're one of the fastest paced teams in college basketball. Gonzaga, of course, also one of the fastest teams in college basketball. This is going to be a track meet. These 2 teams played in Birmingham a few years ago, and I think the final score was 100-90. Wouldn't be surprised if we're looking at something similar to that in this game. For Bama, the situation is kind of similar to some of the other teams we've talked about, notably UCLA, where I'm just not that high on their front court. This team's got phenomenal guards. Aiden Holloway is great. LeBaron Philon staying at Alabama, after declaring for the NBA draft, is a huge get for them. Jaleel Bethea is a former All-American who struggled at Miami last year, but I think he's going to be a great player for this Crimson Tide team. But Taylor Bull-Bowen is an adequate 4 from Florida State. Aiden Sherrill is okay, but I don't love this front court for Alabama, and that's Gonzaga's biggest strength. So that's part of the reason this game's a little lower on the list. It's also, there's not going to be much of a home court advantage for either team in Las Vegas. I bet there'll be more Gonzaga fans, but I don't think it'll feel particularly rowdy either way. This should be a really, really fun game. And then number 5, tons of different choices here, but I went with Oklahoma. And yes, Gonzaga's playing Oklahoma at the Spokane Arena, but it's the second game of the season, and Oklahoma has a really experienced and talented backcourt that I think could present some problems for Gonzaga. They're going to start Mo McGee at the 5, Tate Davis from Notre Dame at the 4, Darion Reed from Alabama at the 3, and then they got Nigel Pack, a transfer from Miami, and Xavier Brown, a transfer from St. Joe's, rounding out the backcourt. Nigel Pack's been in college for like 10 years. He was back at Kansas State in like a different era, it feels like. He's a very, very good scorer, good passer, and a very veteran guard. And then Xavier Brown was one of the best mid-major players in all of college basketball last year at St. Joe's. He's going to be a problem for Coach Porter Moser and the Sooners. I think this game being early in the year is probably an advantage for Gonzaga. They have more continuity. They're obviously in a home environment in the Spokane Arena. But there's a lot of talent on this Oklahoma roster, and Gonzaga won't have really gotten to scout them at all. They won't know a ton about how Moser's using somebody like Darion Reed, how they're, what they're doing in the backcourt between Brown and Pack, who's bringing the ball up, who's, initiating the offense, things like that. It's just going to be a bit of a harder team for Gonzaga to scout. And while I think Gonzaga will win because their front court is better, they are at home and they have more roster continuity, I think that's going to be a sneaky, tricky game. Honorable mentions go to Creighton at home for a lot of the same reasons. It's a true home game for Gonzaga, which helps, but it's early in the year. Maryland and Las Vegas, we just don't know a whole heck of a lot about this Maryland team, and Gonzaga is going to be a little gassed having played Alabama the day before. At Arizona State will be tough. I don't think that team is great, but they have some familiar faces, Mo Odom and Marcus Adams Jr. in particular. Plus, it's a true road game. And then, of course, in conference play at SMC, at USF, going to be tough games as they always are. Well, folks, moving on to close out the week, talking about the Lone Star State. We know Drew Timme is the best Gonzaga player to come from Texas. We'll talk about him, and we're going to talk about 4 other great Gonzaga players from Texas coming up here in just a second. But first, folks, this episode is brought to you by Mazda's Moving the Game Forward. For those who believe it's not just about playing the game, it's about redefining it. There are moments that do more than put points on the board. They move crowds, they move culture, and they keep moving the game forward. And this week's moment that moved the game forward was Rice quarterback Chase Jenkins. He led the Owls to a 3-1 record with a pair of touchdowns on Thursday against Charlotte. Maybe Rice might not be such a bad target for the Pac-12 after all. We're going to talk a little bit about Texas and Rice in particular later in the show. But folks, when you follow what moves you, the unexpected, well, it's only the beginning. And just like there's more to every highlight, there's more to a Mazda vehicle. Mazda, move and be moved. Folks, the weather's cooling down, the days are getting shorter, and that has me wanting to make my home feel even cozier. And when it comes to cozifying your space this fall, Wayfair, that is the way to go. Wayfair has everything you need to set the mood for the season, whether it's comfy recliners, warm bedding, autumn decor, or even an espresso machine so you can make your favorite latte at home. One of my favorite things for the fall and winter, you need a good blanket. And I've been looking around for Wayfair for just the perfect thing. I think it'll really help our house feel more like fall. And Wayfair's delivery is fast, it's free, and it's hassle-free, which makes a huge difference when you're refreshing your home, especially because life is so busy in the fall. So cozify your space with Wayfair's curated collection of easy, affordable fall updates. From comfy recliners to cozy bedding and autumn decor, you'll find it all for way less at wayfair.com. That's wayfair.com. Wayfair, every style, every home. All right, folks, segment 2, still Andy Patton, still Locked On Zags podcast. We are closing out the show and the week talking about the Zags from the state of Texas. For those of you who are new to this segment, this will be number 7 in our series ranking the Mark Few era Zags from different states. We started with Oregon. We've also done Colorado, Idaho, Minnesota, Illinois, and California. And now we are taking on Texas. Found 10 players using sportsreference.com, going through all of the Gonzaga rosters since Mark Few took over as head coach, finding the players that are from Texas, and we found 10 of them, and we're going to rank them here today. The Zags have tapped into the Texas market quite a bit, although as we've seen with a lot of states outside of the Pacific Northwest, a lot of Gonzaga's additions from Texas were transfers, either players transferring to to Gonzaga from schools in Texas, or guys who started out somewhere else and ended up eventually coming to Gonzaga. In terms of who could alter this list, Parker Jefferson technically finished his career playing in Inglewood, California, but he is from Texas, and I think Sports Reference will list him as being from Texas, so eventually he will make his way onto this list. And then we've done this for a few other states, some misses on the recruiting trail. For Gonzaga, there's two very recent ones. Liam McNeely, who ended up going to UConn from Texas, from the same area as Drew Timme. And then Kingston Flemings, who is at Houston for this upcoming season. Gonzaga targeted him kind of mostly after they realized they were not going to get Isaiah Harwell. They went hard after Flemings, thinking, well, Houston's not going to get both those guys. Houston did, in fact, land both of those players. So Gonzaga struck out there on Kingston Flemings. Without further ado, though, we are going to look at these 10 Texas players going 1 through 10, so there's no mystery here. Drew Timme, the number one player at Gonzaga from Texas, very arguably the number one player at Gonzaga, period. Spent 4 years at Gonzaga from 2019 to 2023, averaged 17 points, 7 boards, 2.5 assists. Drew was, and the accolades section of my notes is very, very long here. 3-time consensus All-American, 2-time WCC Player of the Year, 3-time All-WCC, 4-time All-WCC Tournament. He also won a WCC Tournament MVP. He was on the WCC All-Freshman team. He was 2-time NCAA All-Region during the tournament. He also made the NCAA All-Tournament team as well. Drew Timme is the all-time leading scorer in Gonzaga men's basketball history. He did not do this across 5 years. He did not spend 6, 7, 12 years at Gonzaga, as many people like to joke. I don't mind these jokes. I remember them about Kevin Pangos. If people are joking about you having been at a school for a long time, it's almost certainly because you were really good as a freshman. That is why people think, wow, it seems like they've been there forever, because their development started so early. Drew obviously did not start as a freshman. He was behind Filip Petrusev, but then he was great as a freshman and blossomed immediately into a superstar. In those 3 final seasons he was at Gonzaga, he didn't average less than 18.5 points per game. He averaged 21.2 points per game as a senior, one of very few Zags to top 20 points per game in the Mark Few era. Simply put, Drew Timme may be the most memorable, recognizable Gonzaga basketball player since Adam Morrison. I do not think it is close. I think it is close between the two of them, but I do not think there's anybody else in that conversation. Those are the most recognizable Gonzaga basketball players. Drew Timme was an absolute icon for his play, for his boisterousness, for his mustache. Everything about Drew Timme made him an instantly recognizable college basketball figure. He is now balling out for the Brooklyn Nets, and I personally could not be more happy to see Drew having success professionally, making it into the NBA, and doing enough to stick and getting that guaranteed contract. Going to be a really fun year to see him balling out for Brooklyn this upcoming season. The rest of this list was a lot harder to order and figure out. We got 4 more guys here, and then we're going to talk about 5 more players in the third and final segment. The split was pretty easy. I feel comfortable that these 4 players are the next best 4, but you could have ordered them a handful of different ways. Number 2, we are going with Eric McClellan from Austin, Texas. Drew, by the way, from Richardson, Texas. McClellan spent 2 years at Gonzaga, 14-15 and 15-16. He was previously at Tulsa and also at Vanderbilt. He played 54 games for Gonzaga. His overall numbers are kind of, it's hard to say his overall stats because he had 2 very different seasons while he was in Spokane. His first year, he played just 18 games. He was not able to play for Gonzaga until late January. So he played 18 games, 8 minutes per game, averaged 1.9 points. Basically was a non-factor for Gonzaga in his first season. His second season, that 2015-16 year, McClellan played 36 games. He played 27 minutes a game. He averaged about 11 points, 3 boards, 2 assists. He was the WCC Defensive Player of the Year. He scored 20 points in a must-win game over St. Mary's. in the WCC championship. I mean, it must win. If Gonzaga lost that game, their streak of making the NCAA tournament would have ended. That was also the first year of Gonzaga's Sweet 16 streak, because not only did they barely make it in to the NCAA tournament as an 11 seed, they then blasted a couple of teams. They blasted Utah in the second round, which McClellan had 22 points in that game, and made the Sweet 16. Domantas Sabonis got all the attention for that run. Got all the attention for dominating Jakob Poeltl in that game against Utah. But Eric McClellan led the team with 22 points. He also led the team with 20 points in that win over St. Mary's. He was clutch. He was a great defensive player. And he was a very, very critical player at a kind of a critical junction for Mark Few's tenure as the coach for Gonzaga basketball. He is now a graduate assistant coach at Florida Atlantic University under former Gonzaga director of basketball operations, John Jackas. Very cool to see McClellan still in the college basketball system. Always a fun player to root for. Next up, we got Ryan Woolridge from Mansfield, Texas. Woolridge spent 1 year at Gonzaga in 2019-20. He had previously been at North Texas with the Mean Green. Woolridge started 33 games for Gonzaga, played 33 minutes a game, averaged about 10 points, 4.5 boards, 4 assists, 1.5 steals, shot 43% from three, which started what I have deemed the Ryan Woolridge effect, which is when players transfer to Gonzaga, especially if they're coming from mid-majors or coming from a system where they were the kind of focal point offensively. You get to Gonzaga, you play in a system that has more floor spacing, that has more gravity from the big men, and you shoot better from three. Malachi Smith shot better at Gonzaga. Rasir Bolton shot better at Gonzaga. The majority of players who transfer to Gonzaga shoot better, and I deemed it because of Ryan Woolridge, who went from being a 33% shooter for 3 years at North Texas to shooting 43% for Gonzaga in his lone season. He had 11 points, 9 assists in a win over North Carolina. He finished his one season in Spokane, 3rd in the conference in assists, 5th in the conference in steals. Previously, he'd been All-Conference USA at North Texas. Kind of a forgotten player. And the reason for that is because this was the year that there was no NCAA tournament. The tournament got canceled because of COVID. So Woolridge, who never made the tournament at North Texas, who then chose to transfer to a program that was basically ironclad in making the NCAA tournament so that he could go dancing at least once in his career. And of course, Gonzaga beat St. Mary's in the WCC championship. So it's not even hypothetical that Gonzaga was going to make the tournament. They were in the field before it got canceled. The most depressing part about this is North Texas then made the NCAA tournament the next year. Ryan Woolridge just could not catch a break, but a tremendous player that I think will kind of get forgotten, unfortunately, in the annals of Gonzaga basketball history. Next up was Ryan Woolridge's running mate at Gonzaga that year, Admon Gilder. Also spent just 1 year at Gonzaga, 2 grad transfers, 2 players who both joined Gonzaga for just 1 season, 2 players from Texas, Admon from Dallas. He previously played at Texas A&M, played 33 games at Gonzaga, started 10 of them, about 25 minutes a game, 11 points, 2 assists, 1 steal per game. He had some great games. Gonzaga played at Texas A&M in what was Gilder's 4th game at Gonzaga. He was playing his old school at their house. He dropped 16 points with 7 boards in that one. Also had 15 points against St. Mary's in the WCC title game. And again, we didn't get to see him in the NCAA tournament for Gonzaga because of COVID, but he was a former high school All-American before he went to A&M. He averaged 14 points a game in the SEC in the 2016-17 season. Very talented player. And then number 5 on the list is our good buddy Dimitri Goodson-Meach from Spring, Texas. Spent 3 years at Gonzaga from 2008 to 2011. Played 103 games in a Gonzaga uniform, about 20 minutes per game, 5 points, 2 assists, 2 rebounds. He started 68 of the 69 games he appeared in his sophomore and junior years, just didn't start as a freshman. Most notably for Meach, he hit that game-winning shot against Western Kentucky in the 2009 NCAA tournament. They needed a bucket. There was like 5 seconds left. They inbounded the ball to Meach. He just went coast to coast, laid that bad boy in, and that was it. Ball game. A great play, a great decision by the staff to just let Meach go to work and get downhill and get to the cup, and he was able to knock it out. Meach was not a great offensive player. He was a good on-ball defender and one of the quickest, fastest players I've ever seen in a Gonzaga basketball uniform. This dude was absolutely lightning fast. to the point where he realized maybe his talents fit better somewhere else. And he actually went and played football at Baylor, was a defensive back for them, started for them in a bowl game, and ended up getting drafted in the 6th round of the NFL draft by the Green Bay Packers and played in the NFL for a couple of years before an injury ended his career prematurely. Last I checked on Demetri Goodson, he was a scout for the Green Bay Packers. I believe he still is doing that, but it is funny and perhaps not surprising that 2 players, one we'll talk about momentarily, were also college football players that both came from the state of Texas. We know Texas loves its football, and there are not many players who played football and basketball in college, and the 2 Gonzaga players who did, both, of course, from Texas. No surprise there. Well, we're going to move on. Like we said, we got 5 more Texas players to talk about here to close out the show, including some key role players, a few guys that Zag fans wanted to see a little bit more from during their tenures in Spokane. We'll talk about that coming up in just a second. But first, folks, you need to know that your favorite neighborhood spots, well, they run on Square. There are certain businesses that truly make the neighborhood feel like home, whether it's the local sports bar packed on game days, the coffee shop that knows your order by heart, or the corner deli that's been serving your community for decades. These are the places that bring people together. And when neighborhood businesses thrive, the whole neighborhood thrives. So what does supporting a community look like? Spending money there doesn't just support the business, it supports the people behind it and the community around it. Those local spots are what make the neighborhood feel like home, and so many of them run on Square. Square is a proud partner of more than 4 million neighborhood businesses around the world. You can go to square.com/go/lockedoncollege to learn more. But before you do, go support your favorite neighborhood spot. You'll be happy you did. Square. See you in the neighborhood. Folks, it's almost the weekend. It's time to look back and crown this week's MVP on Who Delivered, powered by DoorDash. Just like you can win every Saturday with DoorDash Streaks, saving more every time you order, these players delivered when it mattered most. Let's break it down. For the Washington Huskies last week, running back Jonah Coleman delivered in a big way. Coleman had 5 rushing touchdowns on 15 carries against UC Davis. When the pressure was on, Coleman came through. No hesitation, no delay. And just like Coleman delivered for the Huskies, DoorDash delivers on your Saturdays. With DoorDash Streaks, you can save every Saturday you order. Stack it up all season, and you could save up to $250, including $100 in DoorDash credits. Order this Saturday, keep the streak alive. Fuel your game day only with DoorDash. Terms apply, promo period through November 18th. All right, folks, closing out the show here, still Andy Patton, still Locked On Zags podcast, and we're still talking about the best Mark Few era Zags from the state of Texas. We talked, of course, about the icon, the legend, Drew Timme himself in the first segment. Then we talked about 3 players who transferred to Gonzaga in Eric McClellan, Ryan Woolridge, and Admon Gilder. And then we talked about the great dual athlete in Demetri Goodson, who of course played at Gonzaga before playing football at Baylor. Now we're going to talk about another dual athlete. In fact, we're going to talk about 2 consecutive dual athletes here who played at Gonzaga. The first one is also like Demetri Goodson, somebody who played football and basketball at the collegiate level. That would be San Antonio native Jeremy Jones. I mentioned in that first ad read that we're going to talk about Rice, and that is because Jeremy Jones transferred from Rice to Gonzaga to play for the Bulldogs. He was there from 2016 to 2019, played 96 games in a Gonzaga uniform, started one of them. Only played about 9 minutes a game, averaged 2 points, 2 boards, and a half a steal. He led the WCC with 37 games played in that 2018-19 season. That year was his best season for the Zags. He played about 14 minutes a game, averaged about 3 points and 3 rebounds. Like I said, he transferred from Rice. He was actually at Rice to play quarterback and was going to play and did play on their basketball team. And then Gonzaga said, "We will take you if you don't mind." And he came to Gonzaga and is one of the better role players. I think of players where the stats, like just a quick glance at their basketball reference page, do not tell the full story. Jeremy Jones is high on that list. Mike Hart, who we talked about in the Oregon show, also high on that list. There's a few others, Kyle Dranginis, Silas Melson, etc. But Jeremy Jones, the fact that he averages 2 points and 2 rebounds per game does not even come close to kind of selling why he was so valuable in a Gonzaga uniform. He was a terrific player, a good rebounder, a good defender, a versatile do-it-all glue guy type player. And while his numbers at Gonzaga didn't stand out, he has had a prolific professional career, mostly spent in Japan. But last year he did play in the G League with the Memphis Hustle. or with the Rio Grande Valley Vipers. And then this year he played in Summer League for the first time. And it was great. Jeremy Jones is scoring 12 points in Summer League games after being a bit player for Gonzaga. Like, it's very cool to see that kind of success for him. He was in the States primarily because he wanted to be here for the birth of his daughter. Jeremy is married to former Gonzaga forward Ellie Tinkle, also the daughter of Oregon State basketball coach Wayne Tinkle. And now Jeremy is back in Japan playing professionally again. Very, very cool story and trajectory for Jeremy in his career. Well, like I said, Demetri Goodson and Jeremy Jones, both college football players. But next guy we're going to talk about was a minor league baseball player prior to arriving at Gonzaga in the 2007 season. That would be Ira Brown from Conroe, Texas. Ira Brown spent 2 years at Gonzaga. He played in 57 games, started one of them, played just 7.5 minutes per game. Similar numbers to Jeremy, about 2 points, 2 rebounds per game. He was a super athlete, high-level dunker, and one of the most infamous players in Gonzaga history for the simple fact that people wanted to see him play more. Free Ira Brown became a popular phrase, a popular thing that the fans yelled, that the signs, everybody wanted to see more of Ira Brown, to the point where there is a very popular Gonzaga podcast many of you have listened to called Free Ira Brown, named after this kind of part of Gonzaga culture, part of Gonzaga's history. Ira Brown has a fascinating career that I would dive way more into if we had time. He was a minor league baseball player for the Kansas City Royals, was teammates in the minor leagues with a young pitcher by the name of Zach Greinke, who recently polished off a Hall of Fame career at the major league level. Ira Brown also played junior college basketball before arriving at Gonzaga. Like we said, didn't play much in his 2 years in Spokane, but then has had a prolific professional basketball career, also spent primarily in Japan, just like Jeremy Jones. Brown is still playing. Earlier today on Friday, I saw he signed a new contract. He is in his 40s, and he signed a new contract to continue playing professionally in Japan. He represented Japan at the 2020 Olympics in Tokyo as part of their 3-on-3 team. Ira Brown is an Olympian, an Olympic basketball player who also played minor league baseball, and who also was kind of infamous for his extreme athleticism in 2 years at Gonzaga. Again, another player where the stats do not tell the full story of Ira Brown and his impact on this Gonzaga basketball program and his impact on basketball in the country of Japan as well. Next up, number 8 on the list is G.J. Villarino. G.J. Villarino from McKinney, Texas, spent 1 year at Gonzaga in the 2009-2010 season, played 25 games, about 8 minutes per game, 2.3 points per game. Just like Free Ira Brown was a very popular phrase during Brown's time at Gonzaga, Free GJ was what I remember. This was my freshman year at Gonzaga. There were signs, there was conversation. Everybody wanted to see more of G.J. Villarino. He barely got onto the floor. When he did, he looked good, but he was often playing in garbage time, as you would expect from a freshman. His career never really panned out. He transferred after that 1 year at Gonzaga, sat out the next year, and then played for Appalachian State in the 2011-2012 season. Played 16 minutes per game, but only averaged less than 4 points, and that was it for him at the Division I level. But another fun player that a lot of fans really wanted to see more of during his time in Spokane. 2 more guys to get to here. Next up from Rockwall, Texas is Nathan Dowdney. Nathan Dowdney was previously at Texas Tech before he transferred to Gonzaga. Spent 2 years in Spokane in 04-05 and 05-06. Played 19 games, started 5 of them, played about 10 minutes per game, averaged 1.5 points. He only played 7 games his first year at Gonzaga because of injuries. In those 7 games, though, he played 20 minutes a night and averaged about 3.5 points, 2 assists, and 1.5 steals. Then he came back the next year, appeared in just 12 games, and only at that time was playing about 4 minutes per game. And that was it for Dowdney. Again, previously he'd been at Texas Tech, where he averaged about 4.5 points in 15 minutes per game. Last, but in this case not least, typically last would be least when doing these rankings, but because his impact extends far beyond his playing career at Gonzaga, he is certainly not least, and that is Steven Gentry. Steven Gentry from Fort Scott, Texas, spent 3 years at Gonzaga, 03, 04, and 05, but he was a walk-on. He only appeared in 19 games in those 3 seasons, played less than 2 minutes per game. Let's put it this way. Instead of doing averages, that just doesn't even matter. Steven Gentry played 33 total minutes in a Gonzaga uniform in those 3 years. He scored 7 points with 5 rebounds and an assist. He was a walk-on. He barely played. This is the typical trajectory of walk-ons, and what has become a slightly typical trajectory for Gonzaga walk-ons. He went into coaching. Has been around the block, was coaching at Illinois for a while, has been at Gonzaga now for quite a while as an assistant coach alongside Brian Michelson and RJ Barsh and Zach Norvell, and has been a key part of Gonzaga's offense, a key recruiter for this team. Steven Gentry is a big part of Gonzaga's current success. So again, he may be last on this list for his playing career, but his impact is far more than many of the other players on this list. It's going to wrap it up for me today and for this week here on the Locked On Zags podcast. Folks, thank you so much for making this show your first listen or your first watch of the day. Of course, a special shout out to those everyday listeners as well. We'll be back with more fun shows next week. Got some guests planned for you all. We'll keep doing this series as well. And then when we get into October, which is coming up just very soon, we will start our player preview series as well, which I cannot wait. That's part of my favorite time of the year. Thanks again, folks, for listening. Have a fantastic rest of your day and weekend. And of course, as always, go Zags.